Discipline, consequences, punishments. Everybody's favorite topics, right? I've got a different spin on it than probably most. Let's get into it. If you think being a dad is filled with rewards, challenges, or headaches, and you keep pushing forward because you know this is the most important job you're ever going to do, you're in the right place. Welcome to the Dad's All In podcast. Hey, fellow dad. Thanks for checking out the podcast. I hope you're having an amazing week, my friend. This episode, we're going to talk about either someone's favorite topic or someone's least favorite topic, but it's possible you're in the middle as well. We're talking about discipline, punishments, consequences for our kids when they make poor choices. Now, I say this is probably not their favorite topic because it involves having to address issues that your kids create. I'm going to start here. I want you to understand something really important. And I'm not just saying this through the eyes of my 3 kids. I'm saying this through the eyes of 2,000, 1,500 kids I've worked with through the years. That's pre-K all the way to 12th grade. I want to remind you, kids make mistakes. I made many. So many when I was growing up. I can't tell you all the boneheaded things that I did. How do you handle it when your kids make poor choices? They could be small scale stuff. They could be big scale stuff. I recently had a good friend of mine reach out to me because his son had made some really rough choices and he was looking for guidance. My answer to him, he actually said, "Hey, what would you do if your son did this?" And I said, "Here's the thing. It's not necessarily about my son. It's about yours." And this is where we're going with the topic today. Because I could tell you how I would address it with my kid, but my kid does not have the same brain as your kid. So the way you address it could be similar if they've got a similar makeup neurologically, but it could also be different depending on what your child needs. Not just consequence-wise, but so that they don't do it again. If you're like me, when you got consequences growing up, sure, it stung you a little bit, but did you do it again? Yeah, a lot of times I did. There are some people, actually many, especially males, who believe as fathers that you just have to rule with an ironclad fist. That will teach them, and then they won't do wrong. I gotta tell you, there are a lot of kids out there in the world, maybe you listening when you were a kid, and your parents were like that. Were you perfect? Did you still make poor choices even though your parents ruled with an ironclad fist? The answer a lot of times is yes. So let's actually talk about what are some options for you. Before I get into how we're going to handle this, I want to give you this one important disclaimer. I'm going to tell you, be careful who you get your advice from. There are so many people in the world who will give you advice on things, and maybe they've been through something. Their kid has been through something similar, just like in this situation, this example. That doesn't mean the way they handled it was the way your kid's going to respond well. And the reason? Your kid's got a different brain. Every kid is different. Now, I get this a lot. This question comes up a lot. Well, if you've got multiple kids, is it really fair to treat them all differently? Well, yes and no. And here's what I mean. Your consequences will probably be the same. How you work the kid through, how you work your daughter or your son through that, the messaging you give them could be completely different depending on how they're made up. And that's the key piece here today. The overlying theme is know your kid. Understand what makes them tick. Understand what makes them happy. Understand what makes them stressed out. Understand how they can handle stress. What will they do if I do this? What will they do if I do that? And then we make our decisions accordingly. So I can tell you, having 3 kids of my own, all of my kids have had their moments in life already, that's for sure. The consequences may stay the same, but how we address it with each child is on an individual basis, and it's really because of how they're made up, how they will react to something. I'll give you a really quick example about that. So my one daughter, I told you before in the previous episode, I've got twins. One daughter we really don't have to say much. She would pretty much punish herself if given the choice. If you've been around for a while and you watched the show The Middle years back, there was the daughter, her name was Sue, Sue Heck. And when she was in middle school, her parents really didn't have to discipline her much because she would be so incredibly hard on herself, right? I have a daughter who has similar characteristics to that. Her twin is not the exact same way. So how we approach is different. It depends on the kid. So the biggest key to the puzzle starts it's the ground level. It's connecting with them and learning about your kid and how they tick. Now, if you listen to the first few episodes, you know I'm a former educator. I am an educator at the college level, but I worked for 25 years in the K-12 level. And I can tell you, when I would train staff across the school district, I would always start with, you know what phase 1 is? Phase 1 is connecting and learning about each of those individual kids. You need to know what their strengths are. You need to know what their areas to improve in are. You need to know all of it. What makes them tick, what they're interested in, and specifically what they're interested in can help you drive new behaviors moving forward. I used to be I did a lot of different things on a district-wide level where I oversaw certain programs over 14 schools, one of which was a behavioral facility where we were working with a lot of young boys. There were some girls, but I'll be honest with you, these were more significant, intensive behaviors. A lot of them were boys. And we had to not just give consequences because, sure, that will allow them to understand, hey, I did this wrong. But we had to build behavior. In other words, we had to reinforce it. And what we would do is take their interest and kind of hang out certain things like a carrot so that they could work towards stuff over time. And we'll talk more about that in a minute because behavior in general, if you're from the mindset of just give them consequences and it will fix everything, I'm sorry, that's not the case. If you're on the opposite end and you're like, just praise them all the time, just give them stickers, give them rewards, a pat on the back, but they never get consequences, I got news for you. Sorry, that's not going to work either. It's got to be both. You have to have expectations and you have to be supportive. Kids need both to build behavior. That's how it works. So I've kind of jumped around a little bit. So let me just kind of get back on track here and go back to this main point that your child has a unique brain. So you spend time trying to figure out what makes them tick. I often look through like a coach's lens, and when we would work with players, my goal is to get the best out of them. And so that meant that I needed to know how to communicate with them, how to relate with them, I needed to be able to figure out what buttons to push to get the best out of them. And it didn't look exactly the same for each player. Some players I had to come in a little bit softer with because I knew if I pushed too hard, they were going to crumble. It's going to kill their confidence. They were going to get stressed out. They were going to think, oh, coach is mad at me, or coach is on me, or coach thinks I stink. I'm going to lose playing time. I'm going to be on the bench. So there were certain players that we had to come at from that kind of mentality, like, hey, let's talk them through it. That's how we're going to get the best out of them, build them up, and so forth. And there were other players who maybe we could push harder without necessarily talking them through it. We say, come on, you got more to give than this. You can do it. You can do better. Get in there and do it. And they would respond favorably. So my point is, your kid has a response mechanism built into them, one way or the other. That is a key component as to how you're going to address dealing with the behavior. I could tell you how I would do it with my kids, my individual kids, but that doesn't mean it's going to be perfect for your child. So you really have to think about in terms of learn them, establish your expectations, support them through the process, and when they make poor choices, yes, they're going to have consequences, but let them know you still love them. Let them know that you're forgiving them, and let them know that you're going to work with them to improve that behavior. Those are key components, because if all you have is consequences, they're going to come right back to this behavior again, whatever it is. So understand the reactions you're going to get and look for advice, but be careful where you look for advice, okay? As my friend reached out to me, and I appreciated that, and I was honest with him, and I said, hey, here's how I would handle it with my son, but here are some other options. And you need to kind of figure out what's the best route forward for you. This is not rocket science, but there are a lot of opinions on everything out there. And if you look on, let's just say YouTube, for example, and you punch in how to discipline or how to improve behavior with your kid, you're going to get some people who are like, you just need to hold firm and you never let them breathe, and you're going to basically treat them like you're a sergeant in the military. Will some kids respond to that? Yep. I'm going to tell you it's a very small portion, because some will even follow your directions, but they'll either come right back to it because they didn't learn from it, you're missing the supportive angle of it, or you're going to cause so much stress, you're going to wreck them. Like they're going to they may not come back to that behavior, but the stress level you've created because they weren't prepared for that, that's not part of their reactionary brain. And because of that, they're going to kind of crumble internally. And you don't want that either. You want your kids to be confident. You want to build them up. You want them to know you make mistakes, you learn from it, and we're going to support you in the process as we go forward. It's the messaging on how you deliver it depending on your kid. Now back to what I was saying, the idea of looking for advice, people have it. Some people are going to tell you this is what you do. As I said before in a previous episode, we're in a society where people believe in absolutes. There's just this way or there's this way, and that's it. But most of the answers in parenting come in between. So yes, get some advice from others. Look up information on the internet. Find what you can, but also look through a lens of they don't know my individual kid. Way back when our twins were, there was a period from like when they were birth to probably 18 months. They didn't sleep. It was horrific. My wife and I would average probably 2 to 3 hours of sleep a night. And it wasn't like in one shot. It was like 15 minutes here, 15 minutes here, 15 minutes here. And you're probably thinking, yeah, come on, that's an over-exaggeration. I'm telling you, man, it was legit. I look back at those 18 months and I think to myself, how on earth did we survive? But we did. We made it through. In the meantime, everybody I worked with, it must have been written all over my body language, like this poor guy, they got twins. And his twins aren't sleeping. They're stressed out. They're tired. I'm going to give them advice. And everybody came at it from a place of care and compassion, and they brought their advice. And I remember my one daughter in particular, who is, I say this in the most loving way possible because one day this is going to be an incredible strength. She's stubborn to the gills. She very much is. And so I had these ladies at work telling me at lunch every day, you got to just let her cry it out. She's never going to get through this. If you don't just let her cry it out, she will cry herself to sleep. Now, mind you, that worked great for their kids. Well, here's what this dad did. Because I didn't want to wake up the rest of our house, specifically her twin sister, which was part of our battle, right? They would wake each other up during the night and create a big mess. So what I did, I went to a separate part of the house. I put the pack and play in, and I thought, when she wakes up and she's crying, I'm going to put her in the pack and play. I'm going to just let her be. I'll go lay on the couch for the night. I'm going to let her cry it out. We're going to get it out. Well, so I tried that. 2.5 hours later, I gave in because there was zero chance she was going to stop. She had different ideas. There was no, I'm crying until I give up. You want to know why? She's got her own brain. She has her own strengths. One of her strengths is she's incredibly stubborn, and she was not going to go back to sleep until I reassured her, and I think I patted her back or something to get her to go back to sleep. So my point is this. People got opinions. They're going to tell you how to parent. They're going to tell you how to discipline your kid. And you know why? It's not because they're necessarily wrong. They're giving you the experience that worked for them, which is helpful if your kid is similar and reacts in a similar way. However, do not feel like a bad dad. Do not feel like a bad parent if you take advice from others and it doesn't work with your kid. A lot of times when we're talking about behaviors, it's like throwing spaghetti at a wall. And when I say behaviors, I don't necessarily just mean slapping consequences on them. I mean, making sure that the behavior doesn't come back and raise its head again. We want to improve it so they learn from the experience and they get better moving forward, whatever the behavior is. So you try things, you throw spaghetti at the wall, and you hope something sticks, and eventually what happens is you start to learn. I'm telling you, with our kids, it took years. But now, I feel like we're at a pretty good point. Perfect? No, we're never going to be perfect. We keep, like I said before in the previous episode, we're going to fail, but we're going to fail forward. We're going to keep learning and keep getting better it's like a snowball. You gather more information about your kid as you go along. And so that's what we've done. It doesn't mean, here are the 19 things that we've done with one of our kids. Try all those. That's not the case. I'm saying gather your information, learn about your kid, try and adapt and evolve over time. And it's not going to be as easy as some people are going to make it out to be. Just let her cry it out. That seemed very easy. And apparently it was easy for others. That does not mean, and hopefully it is, whatever behavior your kid is exhibiting that's challenging, or maybe it's a poor choice, hopefully whatever you do will fix immediately. Sometimes that happens. But I'm telling you, a lot of times it takes work. And so the best thing I can tell you is start to learn about how your kid ticks. Learn about their brain. Learn about how they react. Learn about how they handle stress. Learn about what helps them. Not just physically, but emotionally. All of that. And here's why it's all so difficult sometimes. It's because they're humans. You're a human, I'm a human. When you work with humans, it's not always perfect. In education, I would always say in trainings, listen, we're in the human business, so that means we're never hitting perfection. We're just trying to get better. And that's the same thing that I would say with parents. We're just trying to get a little better each day, a little better each year. By the time, if you have a toddler now, by the time your kid is in, let's say, 9th grade, you will have evolved so far in how you handle things, it will blow your mind. So let me finish up with this. One more time. Remember, your child has a unique brain. You might have multiple kids. You're going to have to maybe address situations differently depending on the kid. And that's okay. You can have the same expectation, the same consequences. It's the delivery system that might be different, or the supportive system that might be different depending on your child and how they react and how they handle things. But in the end, they need to know you love them. They need to know no matter what, you're always going to be there. You are their net. Because just like me, I screwed up a ton. I'm still far from perfect, but a net is helpful. It allows kids to know, okay, I made a mistake. I got a consequence for this, but my parents still love me. And they're going to be there for me to help me get better as I move forward. I hope you enjoyed this little blip about discipline, punishment, behaviors. Not everybody's favorite topic, but it's important. And if you did, I would appreciate it if you follow, subscribe, do all the things. And hey, go over and check out our Dad's All In Podcast YouTube channel. We've got more content there. Subscribe there and get involved. That's really where we're getting involved with the conversations. Connect with other dads. I don't have all the answers. You don't have all the answers. Here's newsflash. Nobody's got all the answers. So we help each other out. We listen to each other. We'll try to be snowballs and gather information as we go along in hopes that we just become better dads in the end. I hope you have a great week out there, Dad. Hang in there. I know it's challenging, but this is the most important job we're going to ever do. Your kids deserve our hard efforts to try to help them move forward and blaze new trails. Have a great one. We'll talk to you soon. Thanks for sticking around. If you got any questions you want answered on the show, or you just want some feedback or want to share some ideas, shoot me an email, dadsallinpodcast@gmail.com, or send me a DM on any of the socials @rechargedfamily. Thanks for listening.